We've been looking at the cerebellum mostly in sagittal lateral views. When you start to look at it in a coronal section or from the anterior posterior view, it looks very different. It's not just one big softball at the back of your skull. Just like the cerebrum, the cerebellum has a left and a right hemisphere, and you can see these in coronal views. Instead of having a big fissure separating the two hemispheres, there's a median structure called the vermis. The vermis itself can be divided into a posterior and an anterior lobe, and then again divided into 9 very distinct lobes, but that's too much for us. The vermis separates the hemispheres, and that's good enough. As you can see from this superficial and from the lateral views, the cerebellum has all these folds called folia. These increase the surface area of the cerebellum, making it as powerful as the big brain hat or the cerebrum, despite the fact that it is less than half the size. If we do a dissection, we cut the cerebellum in a transverse or sagittal section, as in the brain on the top right here, and we get this really striking feature. It's able to be seen with the naked eye in dissections, and we call this feature the arrangement of the gray and white matter. We call it the arbor vitae. Since this is part of the brain, the outermost cortex, or the bark, would be gray matter. I don't care what color shows up in a microscope slide. I don't care. The outer cortex is gray matter. I don't care if it's lighter than I don't care what color it is, pink, purple. The outer cortex is always gray, unmyelinated matter. There are some stains for which the white matter takes up the stain more readily than the gray matter. And this is what makes white matter in the cerebellum. It makes it have a darker color, even though it is, white matter. So just remember, what you see in the microscope is not what it is in the body. That tissue in the microscope has been sliced, diced, dried, fixed, dried some more, and then stained to the liking of the person making the slide. There are basically two kinds of cells in the cerebellum: granule cells and Purkinje cells. Granule cells make up that gray matter cortex, or the outer bark of the cerebellum. A granule cell, I mean, that's a pretty general term that could refer to astrocytes and almost all of the other neuroglia, or it could even refer to just the nuclei of a neuron. We put the label granule on them because they are in the cortex. In the mini lecture on the cerebral cortex, we see that the big brain hat has a cortex made of 6 different layers of granule cells. It's pretty much the same here in the cerebellum. Purkinje cells are a little bit more specialized. We see them again. They have a lot, a lot, a lot, lot. I like it a lot. They have a lot of dendrites. I'm sorry, what was that? What was it? Dumb and Dumber? Oh, God. All right. They have a lot of dendrites, and this increases the surface area over which these cells can receive and transmit action potentials. We will see these cells again in the heart and in the digestive system. But looking at both of these cell types, they have a lot of surface area for quick transmission. The axons of these cells extend up into the premotor cortex in the cerebrum, the red nucleus in the midbrain, and the superior colliculi that are on the pons. I'll give you this. Viewing this slide can be difficult, especially if you've not yet viewed the mini lectures on the medulla oblongata, the pons, and the midbrain. These are the structures of the brain stem from inferior to superior. You can locate the ventricles on the pons and the midbrain, making this the dorsal side, the top of each of these pictures, and making the bottom of these pictures each the ventral side. We had these structures called the cerebral peduncles, on which the cerebrum rested. But there are also cerebellar peduncles on which the cerebellum rests. The peduncles are not just for support. They contain gray matter, or unmyelinated axons, that connect the cerebellum to the cerebrum. So, important to Parkinson's disease is the superior cerebellar peduncle that's in the midbrain. Recall, or now know, that in Parkinson's, the substantia nigra fails to produce dopamine. Also, recall or know that there is the red nucleus that's also in the midbrain. And all these structures are affected with Parkinson's because they all work to form a cerebellar output to the cerebrum. So when your premotor cortex is trying to compile the information to determine the next movement, it's like the cerebellum, it's not weighing in. Overall, overall, your cerebellum is involved mostly in posture and balance. It does a whole lot of other things, but let's talk about those as the main things. So, I mean, this sounds like two simple tasks, but it's not. In order to control your postural muscles and balance, a lot of information from the spinocerebellar ascending tract has to be received. Proprioceptors in your lower limbs have important information that the cerebellum needs to know. But that's not all. Your cerebellum also needs to have some visual input too, and it can get that from the midbrain because the midbrain's involved in neck movements and reflexes for visual or auditory stimuli. Once the cerebellum compiles all of the incoming information, proprioceptive, visual, auditory, it then determines an output that's it's gonna send to the premotor cortex. This output is going to involve instructions for moving the large muscles for large movements to control your position in space. The cerebellum is also involved in patterned movements, whether or not they be big patterns like dance movements or small patterns like piano playing. Both of those actions, dancing, piano playing, they both involve spatial perception. Where are you standing? Where will you step next? Where are your fingers? What is the next note? Your cerebellum thinks of life kind of like a game of billiards or pool. Playing pool is all about the angles. I I am not a good pool player. I'm not. I don't know why. I love me some trigonometry. I'm terrible. I'm terrible at billiards. But playing pool involves spatial perception of all the balls, right? Where you're leaning over the table, the angle of the pool cue, which is my problem, and a whole bunch of other things involving trigonometry. Your cerebellum is involved in this type of puzzle solving. Even doing a puzzle on a table is like exercises for the cerebellum. You have to monitor building the puzzle. You have to keep track of the individual pieces that have not yet been found for their fit. You have to take track of where you're sitting, where your hands are, and all types of stuff that the cerebellum loves to try to interpret. So because the cerebellum is so involved in these types of spatial puzzle solving, it also loves to take part in actions that are timed. Now, that could be bobbing your head to some music, or it could be envisioning all of your classes and appointments for 1 week on one comprehensive calendar. I don't I don't know about you, but I certainly have some weeks that literally look like a puzzle on the schedule. And yeah, I feel like I'm stressing my cerebellum out trying to figure out that puzzle of time.